Citizens Communications Council of Radnor Township. And we will get to our agenda forthwith. Are the gentlemen from T-Mobile here?
Yep.
Okay, you don't need to listen to all our stuff. So why don't you take the podium first, and we'll move ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it short.
T-Mobile is a cell phone services provider that are seeking the opportunity to put a device on one of our poles, and they're going to tell us all about it.
I will. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Scott Dolly. I'm the zoning manager for T-Mobile. And with me tonight, I've got Robin Cohn, who's our professional engineer. He's a principal with Bettswood Associates, does a lot of work for T-Mobile. Very briefly, because I don't have a heck of a lot to say about it, we're co-locating our cell phone antennas on the Township Tower right out back here. It's a big lattice tower. It's 200 feet tall. We're locating at 180 feet. We have a gap in coverage, as you've heard many of the carriers that come before you explain. Our radio frequency engineer has determined that there's a gap in coverage. Turned out we were very lucky. We sent our site acquisition specialists out to drive the area. Lo and behold, your 200-foot lattice tower is right in the center of our gap. So we've negotiated a lease with Radnor Township. Steve, who was here earlier, introduced himself to me. He negotiated that with our site acquisition specialist, and it's been signed by the township and by T-Mobile. We've already been to the design review board, had unanimous approval for our design and locating on the tower. We're going to the zoning hearing board tomorrow night for the final approval to be approved to go on the tower, and then we'll be applying for a building permit coming out at some point before the end of the year to put our equipment on the tower. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Sounds like a straightforward proposition.
Very straightforward.
My understanding is that this has to be approved by the Board of Commissioners, and we will recommend to the Board of Commissioners that they move ahead.
Excellent.
Any comments?
No, really, the only question I have, before zoning hearing tomorrow, you need a zoning variance, as I understand.
That's correct.
To co-locate, given the zoning classification of this facility versus what is permitted currently by the wireless communications.
Exactly right.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the motion should be that we recommend to both the board and to the zoning hearing board that this application be approved.
All in favor?
Aye.
There's nobody to oppose it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Would it be all right if I stayed over with somebody since I'm coming back for tomorrow night? Sleep over at your house, maybe? Thanks very
Our
much. I
rates are
appreciate
very
you letting us go
reasonable.
first.
The police department's right down below. I'm sure
Unfortunately, I've slept there once or twice. I don't need to do that again. I'm old now. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Appreciate your patience and your time.
Thank you. Okay, number 2 on our agenda is Radnor Studio 21, General Manager George Strimmel. Welcome again.
Thank you very much. It's funny that earlier today somebody asked me how tall was the tower out behind here, and I guessed 200 feet, which is exactly was. Looked like an old stainless, they're going, but it looked like an old stainless built in North Wales. But anyway, that's neither here nor there because we don't use towers. We just simply use wires. And I'm here to report that we, in our relationship with Comcast, have come to a resolution of the discussion that has been before us, and that within the next 2 or 3 weeks, in quotes, we're working on it, and that we should have the new to us cameras that we have been talking about. We've come to a resolution in which we, that is Radnor Studio 21, will put $4,985 into the project, which will repair, reconfigure, and end up with the cameras, so that let's just say we have come to a resolution. We haven't come to a conclusion, but we have come to a resolution of that particular problem.
So the balance of whatever, $20,000 is being paid by Comcast?
Yes. Yes,
Combination.
it's somewhat in excess, more like 23, 24,000.
Okay. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
It was a long time coming.
Yes. We can report that many of the residents here in Radnor Township suffered through several weeks of no Radnor Studio 21. This was due to the conversion by Comcast to a digital service. That digital service provided, in some cases, I guess, free boxes. You can speak to that better, but smaller boxes, not the fully configured box that most of us are familiar with and rent on a regular basis, but a box. Those smaller boxes, it took about a week and a half to get us up and running. There was never a problem with analog. The old analog system kept on chugging along. The older boxes worked perfectly, but for one reason or the other, i.e. no one foresaw the problem, it did get resolved, but not without lots and lots of calls right here to the Township and to Radnor Studio 21, like what happened to you, etc. It has been resolved, but it took a lot of anxiety and communication to get it done. I don't think it was the smoothest transition I've ever seen in my life, but then again, we were at the brunt of it. Otherwise, I guess there wasn't particularly a problem. So that has been resolved. Obviously, the election season is done, and we at Radnor Studio 21 were able to be right on top of that and report to the Township what was happening and who won and what the configuration would be upcoming within the Township. That's something that someone today said, well, thank goodness you were there, but that's why we are here. That's our business, that's what we do, and we'll keep working on that. You know, we're not done yet with reconfiguring the studio, but we will, we now have some capital monies that we will put in so that we can further upgrade. But right now, the big thing was achieving the organization or the reconfiguration with Comcast, which leaves us with Verizon. I have nothing to report.
Okay, very good. Any questions for George? Thank you very much, George.
Anything? Nothing? Thank you very much.
Ms. Getzfried is the new representative from Comcast. She's been with us before for many years.
The new old
And,
representative.
Shoot.
Okay, well, just to let you know, Kevin will still be your main point of contact, but I'm always available, as I hope you know I always have been, for anything that you might need. But Kevin will still be the primary person responsible for Radnor Township, and I'll just help when I can and cover these meetings.
Okay.
I was going to mention the camera issue that George mentioned. We do expect that to be resolved in the next 3 weeks. At this point, we're waiting for the vendor to do the installation of the cameras. And as you know, everything's just moving along, and that's the issue that we're waiting on right now. So hopefully that will be resolved by the next time I see you. And then I was also going to mention our World of More, which is the DTA boxes. George also alluded to those in his presentation. Basically, the wave of the future is digital signal. Previously, it was analog. To move on to the digital signal, we are requiring a DTA converter, digital to analog converter, for all televisions connected to Comcast. Previously, if a customer had a digital converter, that was sort of the new bells and whistles, where customers had access to on-demand programming, more channels, clearer picture, better sound. This is part of that. There will be no additional charge for customers. We will provide one digital converter box free of charge and 2 of these DTAs, which are smaller And they don't have all the bells and whistles. They don't have on-demand. It's still just the most basic service that we'll be providing. The DTAs will be providing two, in addition to the digital converter, to each household at no additional charge. If someone is requiring more than two, there will be a charge of $1.99 per month per box. That is based on statistics that there are 2.3 televisions in the average American household. So that's, in case you're curious, as to how we came up with the one digital converter and two DTAs. That's how. So we're basically in the process. If a customer chooses not to get the DTA, they will lose some of their channels. They'll just receive our limited basic package, and that's what they'll be charged for. So they won't have the expanded package, which will include things like ESPN and Disney Channel. They'll have limited, which is basically the local broadcast channels and the public access channel, the government access channel, the educational access channel.
Okay, we have a problem in the schools. And Joan, would you just cover what that is?
Yes, since the digital conversion, we're unable to get a lot of the educational channels, such as Biography, National Geographic, all of those, the ones that we really use in education. So we've had some contact with Kevin in terms of how we can remedy that. He spoke to our Director of Operations and offered 18 units to us. We have about 280 classrooms, and then told us that we could purchase additional units at $1.99 per month. Well, as you can imagine, that's cost prohibitive. That is not something that we're able to manage. It's not a budgeted item, and we certainly don't want to lose this valuable resource. So I'm really hoping that there's something that we can work out, some sort of converter that perhaps we can put at the head end in our building where cable comes in, or something that we can really do. There must be something that we can work out, because certainly we can't pay $1.99 per month per TV, and that would just remove such a wonderful resource from our educational program. I mean, that's why you have all these great educational channels. If we can't take advantage of them, we're really at a disadvantage.
Okay, and that is actually with our commitment for Cable in the Classroom, which is to provide the complimentary service. The idea behind Cable in the Classroom, if we step back for a moment and think about if there's something on the History Channel about World War II, the odds of that program airing at 2:30 on Thursday afternoon when the teacher would like to teach the class and show that program are pretty slim. So Cable in the Classroom is actually set up for teachers to tape the programs and have a video library. With the Cable in the Classroom commitment, we did agree, we offered as part of Cable in the Classroom to provide one connection to every school in our service area. That's something that dates back, I don't know, Cable in the Classroom is probably about 20 years old at this point. So really the idea was for one drop per school. We understand that if there's one in the auditorium or maybe the cafeteria for special events, like maybe if there's a space shuttle launch or a presidential inauguration, that a school may want to gather a large group of students for an event like that. But I think with the three, again, we're basing that on the fact that we know that schools typically have more than one drop, that they, over the years, had ended up wiring every classroom. But I think the way that Cable in the Classroom is meant to be used is for it to be taped and then shown later.
Well, we would then need to hire additional personnel, because that would need to be someone's full-time job. If we're really making use of all of these channels to their maximum capacity, and we have all these different subject areas using them, we'd have to hire someone to tape these, burn them onto DVD, catalog them, sign them in and out. You know what I mean? It would be an additional burden, staff-wise, to be able to do that.
Right, and just in the meantime, I can provide you with some information that Cable in the Classroom offers for building the library, actually asking parents to tape things. I know that hopefully that might cover part of it. But at this point, I don't know of any converter that can be, hooked up to one point in a school or one point in the school district to remedy the situation. I can certainly look into that. As far as I know, there isn't anything available. And again, at this point, we really are just limiting it to 3 boxes per school. So and I know that Kevin's been in touch with it's Leo,
Leo
right?
Brandy,
Okay, so I know that at this point, I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer, just that we are limited to the 3 per school.
Well, it's just really disappointing that teachers have been able to use this resource, and now it's taken away, and it's going to be an extra burden on us to be able to figure out a way to get to these wonderful programs.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that you're saying wonderful programs, and I'm glad to
Yes,
hear
yes.
that you're using them, and, I know there are wonderful lesson plans available, and the networks really are making an effort to provide this resource. So at this point, again, I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer, but at this point, we are committed to just the 3 boxes.
Well, I hope we
When-
can continue to investigate this and see if there is something that we can do.
Okay.
Thank you.
When you were taking this back, Kate, and discussing this within Comcast, there are a couple of points I hope you will take back.
Okay?
First is that Comcast's obligation to provide free cable service to the schools predates your classroom program. It goes way back to the original franchise executed in Radnor Township in 1980, and it has been in every franchise agreement since 1980. Second, prior to your digital and of course this was written before anybody really thought about digital, and prior to your digital conversion, the school district was able to receive all your basically basic expanded service channels within each individual classroom. And the teachers could pick and choose what channel they wanted to show. The digital conversion has made that no longer possible. I think both the Township and Comcast interpreted Comcast's obligation the same way basically since Comcast took over the Adelphia franchise, and that was to provide that kind of service in the schools.
I think, again, that's
But I
one per
think-
school.
So
Well, 1 drop per school rather than
but it
every
was a
classroom.
drop that was to provide expanded basic service.
Mm-hmm.
By and you can't do that anymore without having these boxes.
Right, which is why we have the 3 boxes.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is that prior, we had some service, a type of service in each classroom prior to your digital conversion, that your digital conversion, the action of Comcast, has now made not possible in the individual classroom. And
Well,
I
and the
think you
obligation,
should.
right, and I think that's the difference between the obligation and what we
Well,
permitted. Because of course, we were happy to
How
allow,
people construe an obligation is based upon past practice in part. And the past practice was that each individual classroom could pick and choose among these expanded channels. Now, I don't want to get into a legal argument here tonight because I think there needs to be some more discussion between Comcast and the school district. And again, it seems to me that the past practice fairly well defines the needs of the school district of Radnor Township. And as we go into a franchise renewal negotiation, our ability and our willingness to renew that franchise, whether through informal or formal negotiation, or a formal process, informal negotiation or a formal renewal process, will obviously take into consideration the needs of the school district. And I think Joan has fairly well outlined those needs tonight. So I urge you to take those considerations back to Kevin and to your corporate discussions within Comcast with respect to resolution of this issue.
You'll bring our point of view back, Kate?
I certainly will.
See, every time they send you, there's a major problem. It's got to be
You
you.
might not see me in December.
You're the only variable. Okay, any other questions for Comcast? That's a serious issue, and please handle it diligently. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Verizon. You had some fun so far? You enjoying the meeting?
Good evening, everybody. Since last month, I don't have a lot to report. Everything's running smoothly on the Verizon front, so I would just open myself up to any questions that you guys may have for Verizon.
I have a question.
Yes.
How does Verizon deal with the issue that we were just talking about with Comcast? How in municipalities where Verizon provides service to schools, how does Verizon view its obligations that way?
Verizon, in most agreements, and I believe in the Radnor agreement, we provide one drop to the school, to wherever, and usually that's to wherever the PEG channel or.
But is that a digital
education.
drop that allows, so that's the difference?
Well, the Verizon and
Well,
Verizon
yeah,
has
you're
never
right.
been able to,
Right.
I mean, you've never been able to network the entire classrooms with Verizon because
Let me-
within
let
the
me-
agreement was one basic service, which only is the local tier and whatever government or educational access channels are available. So those other channels such as history and discovery would not be available in that tier.
I guess I have one other question for both of you. Are the DTA boxes available for purchase?
At this time, for Verizon, no. All the boxes are rental.
The same is true for Comcast.
Well, there's your revenue stream. Any other questions, John?
Not at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And old business, the status of the communications ordinance, which we've been working on. It didn't take quite this long to get the Declaration of Independence written, but then that had far-reaching implications. John, you've been working on it. Give us just an update of where you are.
Yeah, at this point, we have forwarded for informal review prior to the Planning Commission's December meeting, what we consider to be, the drafting subcommittee considers to be the final set of changes to the wireless communications code.
No.
And presumably, we will be before planning in December. I believe they're first Mondays in December. I'm not certain, but we'll be before them as promptly as they meet again. They canceled their November meeting, so we did not have the opportunity to get before them in November.
And the FCC today, I believe, issued a set of regulations that are going to severely impact how quickly we react to cell requests. Bruce, could you give us an update on that?
Yes, the Communications Commission today, in its program to encourage broadband deployment, basically established timeframes of 90 days for an application for wireless co-location and a deadline of 150 days for all other tower siting applications which are reviewed by local governments. This order also provides that in the case of applications that have been pending at the present time for 90 days for co-location or 150 days for other tower siting applications, there is a period of 60 days commencing, I believe, tomorrow for local governments to take action. This lends a new urgency to the process that this council has been working on, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, for some considerable time. And I suppose that there are two courses of action which the township can take. One is that all these applications should be moved through the existing process unless the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Commission are willing to undertake a fairly urgent process to amend the ordinance to give this council the jurisdiction which we understood that the township government wanted to give us. So if, assuming the board, assuming the Planning Commission were to act at its December meeting and recommend the amendments to the board, the Board of Commissioners then could introduce an ordinance at its meeting on the second Monday in December. I don't know whether they're going to have a second meeting in December. I would hope so. In order to then pass the ordinance at their second meeting. I would point out, however, that that process will chew up approximately 40 days of the 60-day period that the township in which the township must act now under the new FCC procedure. So I think in the meantime, the process which this township should follow is that which exists under the existing wireless ordinances with various reviews by the zoning board, by the design review board, and by the Board of Commissioners in the case of applications for which board action is necessary,
So is the
which
planning-
involves leases of public property and that sort of thing.
So the Planning Commission would be out of the loop too? Do I understand you correctly?
Under the,
I don't think planning is currently involved in the approval process today for wireless
For the
facilities.
existing?
That's correct. And as the amendments are proposed, they're not involved in approvals going forward, assuming the adoption of the amendments. It's simply, we were instructed as part of the process for getting the amendments approved, that we run through planning prior to consideration by the Board of Commissioners. But they will not be, once adopted, if they are adopted, the amendments will not require that planning be involved in approval of applications. It'll either be.
So when
this-
they asked us to take over this responsibility, they put the Planning Commission into the loop. Is that correct?
no, what they did, Mr. Chairman, is they wanted the Planning Commission comments on the ordinance itself. The Planning Commission would not be commenting or having any review process with respect to individual applications.
Right. Yeah. So they put them in the loop.
They put them in the loop with respect to the ordinance amendments
Right.
and the changes. The whole purpose of this, the original purpose of amending the wireless ordinance was to provide applicants with basically one-stop shopping so that they didn't have to go before
Like T-Mobile
various-
just did.
various different boards, as the T-Mobile was here tonight. They've been to design review, they're going to zoning tomorrow. The commissioners have a process, as I understand it, that if they don't act within 3 weeks, the actions are deemed to be taken, so they don't have to get involved. But the whole process was to take those functions with respect to tower siting and bring them into one place in the township,
Which was this committee.
which is this council, yes.
And interestingly, though, many of the comments that we received from planning were not directed at achieving that end. Planning did, and I don't want to recharacterize what they've said, but planning made clear that they felt that this board should look at every application, given the body of technical expertise that this body has developed over time. But then there are other avenues for review after the, if you will, the gatekeeping function is satisfied here. Then depending on where the facility is proposed to be installed, it then stays with us for another review or goes off to zoning hearing But it's interesting that good intentions and the finished product often diverge somewhere, and I think we've seen, I think we've seen that divergence. But if nothing else, we have now formally codified or proposed to formally codify the procedure, so there's no head scratching in terms of where do we go next from the standpoint of the applicant. The applicant will have spelled out in the code now what the procedure is and what hoops they need to jump through.
Okay.
And incidentally, design review is still in the loop.
So now we've reviewed the ordinance with our FCC counsel in Washington, and it conforms to all the requirements of the FCC regulations. And we've forwarded the final version to the chairman of the Planning Commission, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And to the acting town, or interim township solicitor.
That's right. Steve G. also passed it on to Mr. Rice.
Okay.
And my point is that the FCC order of today lends some urgency to coming to a resolution of this.
I understand that. So I think the ball has been effectively passed to the Planning Commission at this point, from my point of view. And they have to be made aware of the urgency by making them aware of what the FCC did today, which is unlikely in their daily reading. So, John, could you send them an email? Could you send Mark Rhodes an email?
I will do that, and also, Bruce, if I could get some of your thoughts on how best to explain what took place and why.
I just want to be
why the game has changed a bit.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that we're on the record of letting the township know the position they're in vis-à-vis the FCC. So if we give that information to Mark Rhodes and he deals with his committee, presumably they'll take the right action to remedy the situation.
That's the hope.
And in the meantime, I think one thing that would be very helpful is if the township staff could compile a list of the applications which are currently pending before the township, together with their filing dates, so that everyone has knowledge of when the relevant period is going to expire.
Do we know
So-
who the staff person is by any chance?
I would imagine it's either Mr. Doling or Steve.
It could be community development. It could be.
Well, that's why I sort of said it would be helpful if the township staff,
Well, I think
whoever the appropriate person is.
Well, I think
could-
then-
I
I
mean,
think
part of
then-
this, I mean, this is a reflection of the currently disjointed process that we were trying to streamline.
Right. I think what we should do then is we should send a communication to the township manager, the interim township manager, with a copy. Do we have a president of the Board of Commissioners yet?
It's still Mr. Masters.
Oh, is he still in office?
Yes.
And Tom Masterson, to ask them to have the appropriate staff person give us whatever information we need, the list of the companies, I guess the date they initiated the action, and then we can review those to see who's under the time gun, or get the commissioners to approve them.
Well, right now, as of today, there's a minimum time gun of 60 days. And that is for applications that have been
Yeah.
pending longer than these periods.
And I think on a practical basis, they're not going to come down on, the FCC isn't going to come down on us unless there's a complaint from the wireless
Well,
company.
the remedy is not with the FCC. The remedy is that the applicant can sue the township.
Right. No, I understand that. I just don't think.
It's not before the ICC, it's sue the township in court. So the FCC is really not in this process.
Okay. We have any more humorous comments that lighten up the the operation here? Okay, so we know where that is. and we know-
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we know where we're going with that. Is there any new business? No. Any comment from the public? Nope. Okay, make a move.
Move to adjourn? Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you all for coming. I gotta give that to Dolan.